to the September 26, 2023 Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. My name is Daniel Isaacson. I'm the chair of the Eugene Planning Commission. To begin this evening, I'd like to call on Commissioner Edwards for the city's land acknowledgement statement. Commissioner Edwards.
Hey, everybody. Can you all hear me? Okay, perfect. Sorry, I was having some sound issues. All right. Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. This land acknowledgement is a way of resisting the erasure of indigenous histories and to honor Native communities by inviting truth and reconciliation. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. As we consider the impacts of colonization, we also acknowledge the strength and resiliency of displaced indigenous people. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as Kalapuya Ilahi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon. They continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We express our respect for the inherent political sovereignty of all federally recognized tribal nations and indigenous people who live in the state of Oregon and across the nation. Therefore, the Planning Commission recognizes that what we do today will affect the many generations who will come after us.
Thank you, Commissioner Edwards, and thanks to everyone for joining in this virtual meeting format. Tonight, we're holding a public hearing on a Metro Plan Amendment and zone change. The specific site subject to this request is located on South Owen Loop in the west side of Eugene. Anyone wishing to access or participate in the public hearing can do so by following the access instructions listed in the agenda for this meeting. Planning Commission meetings can also be viewed by watching the live stream available on our website or broadcast on Comcast Channel 21. If you wish to speak or provide testimony tonight, please let me know, that we will begin the testimony portion of tonight's meeting after a brief presentation from staff. When we reach that point, staff will then provide instructions about the virtual meeting format and how to participate. Before we start, I want to let you know a little bit about the Planning Commission and our role in the process. First, we are unpaid volunteers appointed by the Eugene City Council, who all live and work in the city of Eugene, like many of you. For the zone change proposal, we are not the decision makers. Rather, we will review the proposal, testimony, and other relevant materials and make a recommendation to City Council. The City Council will hold their own public hearing before making a final decision on the proposed zone change. We're at-large members, which means we have to consider the needs of the whole community, as well as the needs of all groups and neighborhoods. We're also human beings, which means each one of us has our own personal views that make us who we are. But as planning commissioners, we're committed to balancing all of the needs as a community and to make the best recommendations we possibly can based on our policies and our laws for us and for future generations. That can be pretty tough to do, and we know not everyone will agree with every recommendation we make. So as we proceed this evening, we want you to know upfront that we are listening, that we care deeply about you and the community. We recognize how important these decisions are and encourage everyone speaking tonight to do so in a respectful, productive way. That said, given the topic of tonight's hearing, some of the terms we have to use are legalistic, and so I will try to explain the requirements in plain English as best I can. Since this is a hearing for a site-specific application, there are unique procedures which we are legally required to follow. The decision-making process for this application is considered quasi-judicial, so we will use a quasi-judicial format for this public hearing. Before we begin, the Eugene Code also requires the planning commissioners disclose any conflicts of interest, ex parte contacts, biases, and abstentions. In a quasi-judicial proceeding, the parties are entitled to an impartial or neutral decision maker. To ensure this is a fair consideration, the Eugene Code and Planning Commission rules attempt to limit ex parte contacts or communications between a party and the decision maker outside of the public hearing process. Each planning commissioner must disclose and describe the substance of any communication they have had about this application outside of the public process. The planning commissioners must also disclose any conflicts of interest. That is, whether the decision they're about to make could or would result in a personal financial gain or loss for themselves, their relatives, or a business with which the commissioner or commissioner's relatives is associated. Finally, a planning commissioner cannot participate if they are biased. That is, for whatever reason, they are incapable of making an objective decision on these applications. Do any commissioners have anything they wish to disclose to the body? Not seeing any. With that covered, the purpose of the hearing is to receive relevant testimony on the application before us. I want to remind everyone that your testimony should be directed toward the approval criteria that you believe apply to these applications. We must ask you to frame your testimony in terms of the applicable approval criteria because the Eugene Code requires that our recommendation be based on these criteria. The applicable approval criteria are listed and addressed in the Planning Commission packet for this evening. I'd like to invite our moderator, Linda Baker, to provide instructions on how to get into the queue for providing verbal testimony tonight. Ms. Baker.
Hello, everyone. I'm Linda Baker, and I'll be the moderator for tonight's meeting. I'm going to cover a few housekeeping items before we begin with the regular proceedings. Firstly, I want to thank everyone for joining us in this virtual hearing and note that tonight's hearing is being recorded. Since we're meeting virtually, I'm going to provide instructions on how to request to speak during the public testimony section. When staff announces that it's time for testimony, you can get in the queue by raising your virtual hand. To do this, please click the Raise Hand button in the menu if you're joining us on a computer, tablet, or smart device. If you're joining us by phone, you must dial *9. At the beginning of testimony, you should start by stating your name, your address, and whether you're in support, opposition, or neutral to the proposal. More instructions will be provided prior to the beginning of the public testimony section of our hearing tonight. With that, it's great to have everyone here tonight, and I will hand it back to the Eugene Planning Commission Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Baker. Traditionally, for quasi-judicial proceedings, once the public hearing is open, speakers were called upon in the following order: those in support, including the applicant, those in it with a neutral position, and those opposed. However, due to the limitations of the virtual hearing format, we have had to make some adjustments. Testimony will begin with the applicant, which this is the city, and then testimony will be received in the order the interested parties have requested to speak. We are unable to fill out the request to speak forms. All interested parties providing testimony will be asked to begin by clearly stating their name, address, and whether they are in support, neutral, or in opposition to the proposal. Following a public testimony, city staff will then have the opportunity to respond to the testimony provided and answer any questions that might come up. Finally, the applicant will be given an opportunity for final rebuttal. I know commissioners have asked for more clarity on when it's appropriate to ask questions, and staff has suggested that if you have any questions about someone's testimony, that you should ask those questions following that individual testimony. Following the conclusion of the public testimony, staff will have a chance to respond to the public testimony presented, and commissioners will have the opportunity to ask additional questions of staff. I will remind everyone that the failure to raise an issue with sufficient specificity to allow the Planning Commission and parties to respond will preclude future appeals on that issue. In other words, please raise issues as clearly as you can so that the city and other parties can address them. As a reminder, the Planning Commission will not make a final decision on this application. We will, however, make a recommendation to City Council, who will hold their own public hearing and make a final decision. Okay, before we start the hearing, I want to thank everyone again for their patience and flexibility as we work within this virtual meeting format. As always, feel free to contact staff if there is testimony you are not able to provide in this hearing or testimony that you wish to provide to the Planning Commission in writing. For tonight's hearing, we'll begin with a brief presentation from Jeff and then open the public hearing. Jeff.
Great. Thanks, Chair Isaacson. Just want to make sure to double check. Somebody raise their hand that they can see my screen. Great. Thank you, Commissioner Beeson and Edwards. My name is Jeff Kepper. I'm a senior planner with the City of Eugene Planning Division, and I'm here for tonight's, it's two applications running concurrently. It's the Metro Plan Amendment and a zone change for the applicant, the property owner, as well as Cintas Corporation. And so so let's, come on, computer, catch up. There we go. So really quickly, just to kind of reiterate some of what we just covered, we're going to open the public hearing. We've got a staff presentation, applicant presentation, testimony, response, questions from commissioners, and then the applicant's final statement. So to move on with it, tonight we're here to discuss a Metro Plan Amendment and zone change. Those are city files MA23-4 and Z23-6. And before I dive into the specificity of what tonight's applications are about, I know we have some commissioners here today who have not been through a Metro Plan Amendment zone change. We had a few of them a few years ago, so it's been a little while, so I'm just gonna kind of take it back to the basics really quick. So the city of Eugene has, we have our zones. We're pretty familiar with how those work. Our base zones kind of lay out what uses can occur on a piece of property, what standards apply. They're kind of our implementing tool of some bigger kind of picture visioning documents. So when we're looking at how zoning works, it's really we start with that big picture document, which in this case, we're talking about an amendment to the Metro Plan. So that Metro Plan has some guiding policies as well as a land use diagram. And that land use diagram says generally what land uses are laid out across the city. And so if a zone is inconsistent with the Metro Plan, somebody can ask for an amendment to the Metro Plan to get the zone that they desire. That's why we're here tonight. So really we look at it as we all start at the Metro Plan, that high level, then we look at any applicable refinement plans, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And then we get down to is that zoning consistent with the Metro Plan land use diagram as well as any refinement plans, and then we've got the zone. In tonight's case, you'll see on the screen I have overlay zones, and those add special regulations. I'll just add a quick note that we are only discussing a base zone change tonight. There's no change to the 2 overlay zones that are on the property. First and foremost, we are talking about a Metro Plan plan diagram change, which changes the land use designation for the property. And so this action, a Metro Plan amendment, requires the approval of City Council, which is why we are here before you as the Planning Commission as part of that process. And so we're looking at a change from campus industrial to light medium industrial. And one of the questions that we get a lot is, what about our buildable lands inventory? I'll just call this out now that both of these designations, campus industrial and light medium industrial, are within the industrial kind of what we call the bucket for our buildable lands inventory. So this change from campus industrial to light medium industrial doesn't actually have any impact as far as our buildable lands is concerned. So this request to move from campus industrial to light medium is really to facilitate the desired zone that the applicant is looking for. So they are proposing to change from E1 campus employment to I2 light medium industrial. And so the reason that that Metro Plan amendment is necessary is because this change without said amendment to the Metro Plan would be inconsistent. So you wouldn't be able to make that change and actually prove up to be consistent with the approval criteria. So basically what happens is they run these 2 applications together in order to facilitate both the Metro Plan amendment and the zone change concurrently so that they can move forward. And so with that kind of what they're looking for out of the way, I'm going to talk a little bit about the subject property that we're here for tonight. So this is way out on the west side of town. If you're headed to the coast, it'd be on your right-hand side as you drive on West 11th. And so it's these 2 large vacant industrial properties. They're about almost 10 acres in size. And one of the applicants, so there's the property owner and then there's the applicant as well. The applicant is Cintas Corporation, and it's their desire to locate a new facility on these properties, which is why that's a use that's only allowed in the I2 zone, not in the E1 zone, which is why they're seeking this zone change. And so you can see here that this is surrounded by mostly other industrial properties to the east and west. This is our zoning map, so you can see that there's I2 bordering on the east and west, as well as a bunch of E1 where the technology park is. And then across West 11th Avenue, you've got some residential lands. And so that's just kind of a picture for where and what is surrounding it. You can see that this is what was called the Green Hill Technology Park. Some of the lots have been developed, some have not, as you can see in this picture. So that said, we really, when making this decision, it's important that we focus solely on the approval criteria. So for the Metro Plan amendment, there's 3 approval criteria. So we've got first and foremost, is the proposal consistent with the statewide planning goals? The second criterion is, does it make the metro plan internally inconsistent? So I consider that consistency with the metro plan, right? We're not making it violate itself in some form or fashion. And finally, is it consistent with the Envision Eugene Comprehensive Plan? As you can see here with the check boxes beside each, we found, as you can see in the staff report within the findings, that we did find that they are consistent with all components of this. Then there are the criteria for the zone change. So we have consistency with the metro plan. So without the metro plan amendment, that's why this, these two processes running concurrently is so important. Without the metro plan amendment, this first criterion for the zone change would not be able to be met. So that's really why we're here tonight. So if the metro plan amendment is approved as well, it demonstrates consistency with the metro plan. Is it consistent with the refinement plan? The applicable refinement plan in this case is the West Eugene Wetlands Plan. A long time ago, the West Eugene Wetlands Plan applied the wetland buffer overlay zone to this property, and that's proposed to remain. And so there's no change to that. So the only wetlands on site are actually filled, so it doesn't designate them for protection or anything, but they're not proposing any change to that overlay to remain consistent with that refinement plan. I'll come back to the transportation planning rule here shortly. Another criterion is talking about key urban facilities. This site, as outlined, is served by, or it's really nearby the water, sewer, electric, police, fire, parks, all that is available as outlined in the staff report. And then does it meet the siting requirements? The siting requirements are specific to each zone. So the I2 siting requirement is that the land is designated light medium industrial, which, as I said, if they change the metro plan to be light medium industrial, they therefore meet the siting requirements. So based on that, the approval criteria are met for the zone change. The transportation planning rule is the one kind of odd duck in this list. It's actually a rule coming out of state law, in which whenever somebody is doing what's called a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, or a PAPA, we have to essentially identify whether or not the change in land use designation or the change in zoning is going to have a significant impact or significant effect on the transportation network surrounding the subject property. So the applicant submitted a detailed analysis prepared by a transportation engineer that essentially identified that under the strict rules of the Oregon administrative rules, there will be no significant effect to the transportation system, and information detailing as such is kind of outlined in the preliminary findings provided in the staff report. And so kind of with all of that said, staff's conclusion is that the proposal complies with the applicable approval criteria for each application, that being the metro plan amendment and zone change. And finally, our recommendation is that the Planning Commission deliberate following the public hearing and issue a recommendation for the council's approval of this plan amendment and zone change proposal. And with that, I will hand it back to Chair Isaacson.
Thanks, Jeff. Now I'd like to open the public hearing. If you'd like to speak and have not already raised your hand, please raise your virtual hand now to get in the queue. Testimony presented at this public hearing should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria or other criteria that the speaker believes applies to this decision. The applicable approval criteria for these applications are from Eugene Code sections 9.7735 and 9.8865. Ms. Baker, how many speakers do we have in the queue?
Okay, so we currently only have the applicant's representative.
Okay. Well, we encourage people to submit written testimony as well. Written testimony may be submitted via email, by mail, or in person. More detailed instructions on how to submit written testimony are provided in the materials for this meeting and are available on the application notices. Ms. Baker, do you want to provide the instructions and begin the testimony section?
Yes. So hi again, everyone. I will announce whose turn it is to provide public testimony, as well as announcing who is up next. When you are announced for public testimony, you'll be promoted to a Zoom panelist, which will allow you to unmute and turn on your video if you choose. Please do not unmute or turn on your video until it is your turn for public testimony. Please start by clearly stating your name, address, and whether you're in support, opposition, or neutral to the proposal. When your public testimony is concluded, you will be returned to the Zoom attendee status. If any technical difficulties are encountered, we will move on to the next person in the queue and try again after that person's comment. With these instructions out of the way, Teresa Bichelle will be the first person providing public testimony. So hold on one moment. All right, so I'm going to share my screen. And Teresa, please let me know if you would like me to start your presentation.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Teresa Bichot. My mailing address is P.O. Box 50721, Eugene, Oregon 97405. As you heard earlier this evening, Cintas initiated the plan amendment and zone change to allow the expansion of their existing Eugene plant. Next. Next. The property is located, it has frontage on West 11th. Access will not occur, however, from the West 11th side of the property, but all vehicular and pedestrian access will be from South Owen Loop along the north side. Next. The general plan diagram, as you can see by this slide, the existing land uses are fairly mixed. There's not a single cohesive pattern. And as you can see, there are existing light medium industrial designated properties within the immediate vicinity. Next. The proposed Metro Plan amendment is consistent with statewide planning goals. The site will remain available for industrial use. Public services are available, and the change in land use designation could actually result in a decrease in traffic. Next. There are no Metro Plan policies that are directly relevant or that specifically mandate a certain land use designation for the subject property. So we believe the change in designation will continue to be consistent with the Metro Plan. Next. Another important approval criteria is consistency with Eugene's comprehensive plan. This change in land use designation will continue to retain an adequate supply of industrial land. The change will increase the diversity of employment in West Eugene and will be consistent with the transportation system plan. Next. This is a slide that shows existing zoning and proposed. And as you can see, within the Green Hill Technology Park, the properties are zoned E1 for the most part. But on either side of the Green Hill Technology Park, our property is zoned light medium industrial, or I2. Next. The I2 zone will implement the light medium industrial plan designation if that amendment is approved. And again, there's no mandatory Metro Plan policies that are directly related to the zone change. Next. The West Eugene Wetland Plan does not have a land use map, and that's an important factor to consider. Many refinement plans, especially neighborhood plans, have a land use diagram that refines or zooms in a bit and provides guidance as to zoning. And the West Eugene Wetland Plan, the impetus was to identify wetlands to be protected and areas where they could be developed. So on this particular 10-acre site, the West Eugene Wetland Plan does not designate any wetlands to be protected. So we believe the change in plan designation does not conflict with the only applicable refinement plan for the property. Next. This is the wetland designation map from the West Eugene Wetlands Plan. And I know it's a little hard to see, but along West 11th in this area, there are no, green is the color indicating wetlands to be protected. There are properties, of course, in West Eugene that are protected, and many have had extensive restoration work done or have become mitigation sites. But that is not the case for this area within the Green Hill Technology Park. Next. So regarding the orderly extension of urban facilities and services, Cintas looked extensively at available sites within Eugene, as well as in smaller communities that would be within a commute radius for their employees. And essentially, the site inside the city limits in the Green Hill Technology Park rose to the surface as being one of the best sites, primarily, or at least a significant factor, was the availability of urban facilities and services. Fully improved street, curb, gutter, sidewalk, all the urban services, sewer, water, power. eWeb has indicated they can provide the services needed for this plant. So that checked off a lot of boxes for them. Next. Although not explicitly an approval criterion, I did want to just pause for a moment to say we believe that Cintas will be compatible with nearby industrial uses. On the left is a picture of the market of choice warehouse distribution facility. They have nice landscaping in the front. They have a modest one-story type warehouse building with some articulation. On the right is another industrial building. Again, some nice landscaping. Go to the next slide, if you would. Couple other facilities. You have the, beer manufacturing at the corner of Terry and West 11th, again, with nice landscaping out front. They do have a lot of large semi trucks, and they they distribute the beer. And then on the right, you see a slide of a partial two-story building also in the Green Hill Technology Park. Next. This is an example of a recent Cintas plant. And you can see it's a fairly good-sized building footprint with some modest articulation, but certainly a welcoming appearance, especially at the main entrance. Next. Cintas is very familiar with stormwater requirements, requiring detention ponds, which this facility will have. You can see some of the native landscaping as well as other landscaping nicely surrounding this particular Cintas plant. Next. So this is a conceptual. We know you're not approving a particular industry this evening, but you might be wondering a little bit about what it might look like. This again shows a driveway and pedestrian connections from Owen Loop South. The building does have some articulation, a lot of movement going in and out of the building. This facility is not just expanding in size and increasing the number of employees. it is going to include, for the first time ever in the Eugene plant, a laundry processing facility. So rather than picking up uniforms and items to be cleaned and trucking them to Portland to a laundry facility, they can be done here. And that saves a significant amount of fossil fuel and also improves the work environment for the employees and significantly enhances customer service. The other component that might go in, they're very confident in this, is what they call a clean room, where they'll be doing work with uniforms needed in biotech industries, where the garments need to be cleaned for working in laboratories and things like that. And this will be the only facility in the Northwest that will handle that type of cleaning. Next slide. This gives you an idea. Could they have gone on a smaller site? Possibly they could have wedged themselves onto a 8.5 or 9 acre site versus the 10 acre that they're acquiring. But with this site, what it does do is between Owen Loop South and any of the parking or building, there is a 30-foot stormwater swale easement that limits any development. So that will become a nicely landscaped area. As you can see on the east side of the property, there's an area for stormwater collection. And along West 11th, yes, there will be your standard parking lot screenage, landscaping, but there's additional land area to be able to do some nice plantings that help provide a buffer with any future development to the south. Next. So again, the Eugene plant expansion will have a landscape buffer along West 11th on the private property. The open space we anticipate will significantly exceed city standards, not only for the E1 zone, but also for the I2 zone that is being requested. And the stormwater facilities, there's room to be able to attractively design them. And with that, I think next, let's just see. Also, you might be wondering why going from E1 to I2. I think the answer is clear. The use of cleaning and dyeing plant is not one of the specific listed uses permitted in the E1 zone. But in this case, allowing the I2 zoning actually will increase, regardless of Cintas, it does increase the number of industrial uses permitted, and it could significantly help to diversify jobs in West Eugene. The Cintas Eugene plant, as I shared earlier, will significantly reduce the use of fossil fuel. And I learned recently that the state-of-the-art laundry processing facility they want to do here in Eugene, they're going to do it right. They are going to reuse 50% of the water that enters the plant will be reused. This is incredible, and it's a good sign of trying to protect water quality, and also just recognizing that to be good stewards for the environment. So that is something that's very important. Not all of their plants do that level of recycling or reuse, but this one will. And they're excited about that opportunity to do that. Next. Or is that the last one? Okay. I think in closing, maybe just back, well, actually, you're fine. You can just leave it where you want. In closing, I want to thank the Planning Commission for your service. I really appreciate you considering these two applications. I want to specifically thank Jeff Gepper for navigating us to this point and helping us be here this evening. I am available to answer any questions you may have and look forward to hearing your deliberations later this evening. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have anybody else in the opposition, Ms. Baker?
We do not.
Okay. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time out of your evening to share your thoughts with us. Does staff have any comments or response at this time?
Yeah, no, that was a very thorough presentation, and I just wanted to call attention to the fact that this is a quasi-judicial land use decision. We are focused on the approval criteria, as Teresa and I both kind of covered in detail tonight. And so while I really respect and appreciate all the work that Cintas has done to get to this point, I provided within the Planning Commission's packet, that there are we're changing the zoning. We are not guaranteeing a future land use, and so when you're looking at those approval criteria and the findings are based on such, when you review those findings, it basically those are reflecting any potential use occurring from that list of industrial uses. And so just to bring a finer focus onto the approval criteria before you as we look in towards deliberations.
Thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions of staff? Also, keep in mind there will be an opportunity to ask questions of staff following the close of the hearing for any items that may be needed for follow-up during the deliberations. And now is the opportunity for the applicant. In a moment, we'll kind of queue you up for the applicant's final statement, but Commissioner Bailey, you're up next.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for Ms. Bischow. I believe at the beginning, you mentioned an expansion of Cintas facility. Where is their existing facility? And is it adjacent or nearby? And does this facility do the same function as the existing facility?
Yes, I can answer that question. They're located out by the Eugene Airport. They are currently on industrially zoned land, and they're just busting at the seams. They've had significant growth since they opened the plant, and the current plant does not actually have a laundry facility. So you'll see a lot of Cintas trucks in the community driving around. Well, there's a lot on I-5 that go all the way up to Portland to clean that nurse's uniform, and then they bring it back. And it's quite an excellent crew. So this expansion is not only an expansion in square feet, making the plant bigger, but it also allows them to do additional processing of the materials.
And the other question I have about their function, it's probably off point, Jeff, but I'm wondering, given I live in the Bethel area and we're very sensitive to everything that went on with Baxter, I'm curious about if Cintas is dealing with chemicals and toxic materials, and its cleaning and dyeing is, the whole title is something that would require very careful and safe handling of toxic waste. So I'm curious about what their record has been and how their existing facility is performing.
Yes, I can answer that. To my knowledge, they haven't had any code or DEQ violations at their current plant. They are well known nationally for their attention and care with regard to both the waste products, and the new facility will be using state-of-the-art equipment rather than older facilities tend to have problems, not necessarily Cintas, but in general, with leakage and things of that sort. But this one will be highly monitored, and they do have an excellent track record. And when you think about it, the efficiencies and safeguards with a plant of this type far exceed what a business that doesn't have their uniforms cleaned professionally by a company such as Cintas actually has a higher risk of pollutants entering our water system. So I am confident that working with our Metropolitan Wastewater Treatment Plant and Public Works staff, as well as the state agencies, that they're going to be doing an excellent facility. And I believe Adam Dimmerling, the executive director, and Tim Kidd are listening here this evening. I don't know if they're available to answer that question.
They actually have their hands raised, and I will promote them to panelists. Hold on one moment. So Tim
Okay,
will
thank
be
you.
the first person to speak, and then Adam Dimmerling, and then Jeff Gepper.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Bailing and Planning Commission, while we're waiting for folks to pop over to panelist status, I just want to remind everyone that although these questions are fine to be asking, and I appreciate the applicant's responses, keep in mind always the applicable approval criteria. This is a request for a zone and plan designation change. The property is currently zoned industrially, and so it is planned for industrial type uses. The question of whether a particular industrial use is operating in the way that they should be is a code enforcement. It's outside of the Land Use and Planning Commission's realm. So I just wanted to kind of make that point before we move on. Thank you.
So you want me to respond? Because I don't mind responding if it's okay. So, and Adam will know more specifics than I will. My name's Tim Kidd. Thank you all for your time tonight. I've actually worked at the Eugene facility for nearly 25 years. I've been the GM for about the last 12 years. We've not had any DEQ violations or anything like that. We've never even had an OSHA violation at our facility in Eugene, Oregon. We're actually a VPP star site and have been for, I want to say 5 or 6 years now. We just had a renewal 2 years ago. So we've worked with Mark Hurley at OSHA several different times through Sharps and whatnot. But yeah, I just want to bring that up. There's never been any violations that I've ever been aware of since my tenure with the company. And we've only been in Eugene about 27 years. So I've been there almost the entire time. So I just wanted to answer the question the best I could. But Adam Dimmerling is the expert in this area. He might be able to shed some light on it if you want him to or don't want him to. Lauren, it's up to you.
I don't think that we do. I think we should just move along into the applicable criteria.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions else for other commissioners? Okay, let's we'll move along. Now is the opportunity for the applicant to make any final statements, which I think we've kind of covered. But if you want to try to keep it brief, Ms. Michaud, that'd be great.
Just thank you again for your consideration, and we look forward to seeing your recommendation. And we have no rebuttal comments since there is no opposition. Thank you.
Thank you. The Planning Commission public hearing and the record are now closed. At this point, we can begin deliberations on the proposed code amendment. Are there any commissioners that wish to speak to the idea of this? Commissioner Beeson.
Thanks. I'll jump in. I have a couple of comments. And first, thank you to Risa. Thank you to Mr. Kidd for the comments. Appreciate that. And thanks to Jeff Gepper, and I'm assuming Lauren and a few others. I found all the material really straightforward and comprehensive, helpful to understand this. All of it seemed pretty clear. I think I don't really have questions or concerns. I guess what I'd put out there, and certainly subject to hearing from other commissioners, I'd be ready to proceed with a recommendation to the council for their approval of this. I think I found all the material that was provided to us, the findings, all the reference material and everything was comprehensive, and certainly answered all my questions. I thought that the findings were clear, comprehensive. I learned quite a bit. I liked the way they were organized. I guess obviously they'd be organized, addressing the Metro Plan amendment first and then the zone change. Found all of that to be really helpful and clear. And it appears to me, going through it, it looked like the proposal meets all of the applicable approval criteria that's, I guess, in front of us to recommend the amendment to the Metro Plan and also the accompanying zone change that would allow for this particular use by this company. It appears everything kind of fits in place. Looks like a good spot. Looks like everything's been well thought out. So I'll leave it at that, but I'm ready to proceed with the recommendation when others are. Thanks.
Wonderful. The only thing I was going to ask, this is just maybe a formality question for staff, is that the part of the presentation that I thought was interesting was the map, where it kind of has a little bit of a kind of a Swiss cheese of that particular area that doesn't seem to have one kind of cohesive zone. Given that this is a kind of a pretty much seamless transition to add this to it, and we're doing it kind of piecemeal, as I would assume previous zone changes have been asked for and approved by city council and planning commissions before us, to allow other industries to do their thing. Is there any appetite, at least in the future, to streamline the process so that businesses can get up and going without having to go through the process with us if it's already an applicable process? It's something to think about, so that we don't have to go through this if it's not necessarily needed. So that was my only consideration. And do I have, in closing my remarks, do I have a commissioner that maybe has a motion on the table that they'd like to bring forward? Commissioner Beeson. You're muted.
Not seeing any other hands, I'll jump in. I'll take a whack at the that's kind of a term of art here. I think I'll take a try at a motion. I'll assume that Lauren will
Commissioner Beeson,
necessary editing.
Commissioner Beeson, I might have Jeff Gepper might be able to help you out here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll just interject and say that we do. I believe I provided a written motion. I think Commissioner Edwards might have a copy of that by chance.
Okay.
That or Chair Isaacson might have it. I apologize.
If the body will let the chair make a motion and allow me to do that, and then I'll just go ahead and do it. If Commissioner Edwards, if you do not see it in your box.
I'm looking for it. I did see it, and I'm freezing up, so I apologize.
All right. Well, how about we'll just skip, and I'll make the motion.
Sorry, I had it up here.
That's all right. So, as a commissioner, I will move that the Planning Commission recommend that the City Council approve a change to the Metro Plan designation for the two properties located on the south side of South Owen Loop as identified in Attachment A from Campus Industrial to Light Medium Industrial. Approve a change to the zoning of those properties from E1 Campus Employment to I2 Light and Medium Industrial, and adopt the findings proposed in Attachment D. A second to my motion. Commissioner Edwards seconds is the motion. I do not have any intention to speak to the motion. I'm perfectly fine calling the question unless somebody else would like to talk or say something to the motion. Any of the commissioners have the opportunity to do so. Seeing none, I'm going to go ahead and call the question. All those in favor of the motion as stated, please rectify by raising your hand. Yeah, motion passes unanimously with Commissioner Isaacson, Edwards, Beeson, and Bailey. Back to my aspect. I think that is it for us. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting adjourned at 6:21 p.m. Thank you, everyone.